Good morning. I want to thank all of you all for being here. This is a fairly substantial attendance here today. I want to acknowledge our Ward 2 council member who is here with us today also, a gentleman who has as great an interest in these issues as anybody in the District of Columbia, and someone who I've worked with for 20 plus years when I was at DHS, and he was the relatively brand new council member for Ward 2. So please join me in welcoming Council Member Jack Evans. I want to thank all of you all for joining us here at the Kennedy Recreation Center, which of course is here in the historic Shaw community. You're probably wondering why we would have an economic development announcement on a recreation center. And you got it, Tom. That's exactly right, because right over my shoulder is a shining example of the economic development that's taking place here in the city and moving widely. We think across the city and will continue as a result and substantial part of the plan. This is a momentous occasion, we think, for us in the city. We are releasing today, and I want to acknowledge, you'll hear from him, I want to acknowledge in particular our Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development, Victor Hoskins, who has done a great job, I think, in leading this area. This is our first ever economic development strategy, which has emanated from a relationship with our in particular with our local universities, and you're going to hear from some representatives of the universities who work so closely with us, as well as our business leaders, and you're going to hear from the gentleman who has been the moving force behind O Street Market, Richard Lake, and Roadsides. Thank you, Richard, for what you've done. Before I go into the strategy, I just want to mention a few things about the O Street Market. Obviously, just across the street, I think it's a powerful symbol of the economic development that is taking place here in the District of Columbia and that we are growing. First, it's a reminder of the history of the O Street Market. Did you all know it was built in 1881? If anybody was here in 1881, would you raise your hand? Oh, you can put your hand down. It served Washingtonians, obviously, during the 19th century. It functioned not only as a market, but also a gathering place for people. And it collapsed. What was it? The roof collapsed, I think, in 2003 under the weight of snow. And so now, a decade later, almost a decade later, we are working with roadside development to be able to restore, not just as it was, but in a 21st century manner, the O Street Market. This project has created 400 construction jobs, and there will be 400 new full-time positions at a newly renovated, I won't say renovated, newly built giant supermarket, hotel, and a variety of retail establishments as well. There will be new, we think, quality shopping options right here in the backyards of the people who live, especially in this area of the city. And it's yet another effort to keep our dollars right here in the District of Columbia. One of the things you'll hear about is the retail leakage, which is about $1 billion a year. And a lot of what we're doing, including this, is designed to stem the flow of dollars outside the city. There's also something else that I want to point out, too, in that this development, in part, is being made possible by over $50 million in investments from international investors through the EB-5 program. EB-5, simply put, is a program in which people can invest anywhere from $500,000 and up, and if they can ensure that there will be 10 jobs created as a result of those investments, they then will be able to get a visa, which is proving to be quite a propitious opportunity for roadside. When we were in China, we actually finalize the deal on a $40 million piece of that $50+ million investment, and we think there will be more. So anyway, I want to thank Richard Lake. I want to thank his partners. I want to thank all of those who are associated with Roadside for giving us a perfect backdrop for launching the 5-year economic development strategy. So how about a big hand for Richard? I think you all know that for some time I have spoken about the district's need for a transformative economic development strategy. Would speak to virtually anybody who would listen about this issue as a way, as an avenue for creating new job opportunities for our residents. So today, consistent with Goal 2 of the One City Action Plan, and I know everybody in here has already read the One City Action Plan, so I wouldn't insult you by asking you if you haven't read every word of it already. But consistent with Goal 2, we're delivering on our promise to release this plan. And by the way, I think we'll have copies for folks, but this is at least what it looks like. This is the full plan, and there's a lot of data in this document that undergird, the data undergird the directions that we are planning to pursue. And then, of course, the executive summary, which is probably what people will read. But I urge you to at least take a spin through the entire document. I think you will be absolutely thrilled. I mean, look at these charts. Tom, I know. Should I give you a copy right now?
My table is level. I don't need it.
In any event, we kicked off the beginning of this process back in June. It was an effort spearheaded with we were at the Carnegie Library, right, Victor? Spearheaded by the business schools of George Washington University, Georgetown, Howard, and American universities. And I want to thank each of those prestigious institutions for their commitment. And in addition to the deans of those business schools, in the aggregate, we had 16 MBA students who worked with us on helping to make this reality. There was a strategy advisory group comprised of business, civic, and academic leaders. And in the last 4 months, almost 200 city stakeholders have been interviewed across 7 targeted sector areas, core sectors that we are planning to focus on, including federal government agencies and their leaders, contractors, people providing professional services, higher education, those in healthcare, hospitality, technology, retail, and real estate and construction, which has guided the development of the plan. Today, I want to be absolutely clear about my economic goals for the city. They are ambitious, but they are achievable. Within 5 years, implementation of this plan will allow us to create, and you probably go like, what were you smoking outside in the back, before you came in this building? 100,000 new jobs, and will generate $1 billion in new tax revenue for the city. And while I don't think anybody expects us to go into excruciating specificity about that today, we do know how we will get there. What would our city look like in 2017 with 100,000 new jobs and with $1 billion of new funding that would help to support our schools, public safety, new investments in a variety of areas, including infrastructure, because as we continue to grow as a city, we're going to have to pay attention at the same time to the infrastructure of the city. We are adding 1,000 residents a month in the city, and that will tax our water systems and the other components of the infrastructure of the city. There are 6 bold visions that are articulated in these plans, in the plan to achieve the goals. 1, establish the most business-friendly economy in the nation. 2, create the largest technology center on the East Coast. 3, become the nation's destination of choice. 4, end retail leakage, which I mentioned previously. 5, build a top-notch, first-class global medical center. And 6, become the top North American destination for foreign investors, businesses, and tourists. Each one of these visions is tied to tangible, sector-specific initiatives that will create jobs and generate tax revenue. There are 52 initiatives in total, and when you pour through the document, as Tom is moving right through now, you will see that those 52 initiatives are associated with one of the vision statements that I mentioned earlier. So let me just mention a few of those initiatives. One, secure commitments from major hotel groups, retailers, and construction companies to collaborate with the workforce intermediary, which some of you will recall we created. The first workforce intermediary was created just a matter of months ago in the city, focusing on 2 specific areas, construction opportunities and hospitality opportunities, which we know are foundational here in the city and will continue to grow. The second one is to develop the Macmillan Tract in Ward 5, something that's been talked about for some time to be developed, but to develop it as a medical office hub. 3, to partner with technology firms, universities, and hospitals to build an innovation hub at St. Elizabeth's. If you've been following what's going on there, we already have begun that process. We've mentioned that we're working with 3 firms, SmartBIM, Sidlam, which is a French-based firm, and a small firm that started in Redmond, Washington, and now has gone worldwide, a firm called Microsoft, which has indicated a desire to be here in a larger way in the city. 4th, to launch a campaign to bring technology talent to our city, including a presence at the South by Southwest Festival, which, David, is the biggest technology festival in the world.
It's up there.
Yeah. Nah, it's in the world. They don't know any different. It is, in all seriousness, it is one of the largest technology-focused conferences, seminars, whatever one chooses to call it, festival in the world. And we've begun to establish a presence there. 5th, to establish a culinary incubator to help aspiring chefs find the kitchen space they need to become entrepreneurs. As a matter of fact, we've talked about doing some of that in Ward 8. We've already got a plan that we put in place to start that process. And 6th, as an illustration again of the 52, leverage the D.C. China Center, which we've established in Shanghai, to support small businesses and universities entering the Chinese market. Let me say again that we are absolutely thoroughly committed to these initiatives and seeing them through to fruition. We already are setting aside funding and resources to make the 6 visions a plan. Some of that already has been done in the fiscal year 13 budget, and there will be additional requests in the fiscal year 14 budget. And this is an illustration of what we're trying to do with our budget, to the extent possible to say that resources are being devoted to, requested for a particular initiative, and we can tie those resource requests to what it is that we intend to do and expect to be the outcomes. We also are going to track and report on our progress. We've established a dashboard for the One City Action Plan, and we'll do something similar for the 5-year economic development strategy. So now, I want to ask our Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development, a gentleman I didn't even know 2 years ago, and well, I would have missed something had I not gotten to meet and know and work with Victor Hoskins. He is a delight. He's a first-class professional. I probably don't go a day now without interacting with Victor in some kind of fashion. So please join me in welcoming our Deputy Mayor, Victor Hoskins.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, the Mayor said that, we didn't know each other when we met in January of 2011. And I have to tell you, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, I don't think I've ever met an elected official that loved the city so much. And I just wanted to be around somebody like that. I don't know about you guys, I don't know about your careers, but in my career, a dedicated person that loves what they're doing is the greatest leader. And I just want to recognize his tremendous leadership in this administration. And talking about leadership, I have to thank Dean Guthrie, who is the dean of the GW Business School. The dean and I met about 2 months after I joined the administration, and I did a little research on him before I sat down with him. I found out he was a China scholar and read a lot about his background. It's very impressive. But what really impressed me the most is he actually wanted to help us change this city. He said, Victor, I don't want to be an academic that sits in your city and just teaches students, and then those students leave and go and work in other places. I want to tie my people to your destiny. What are you guys doing? Where are you going? How can I get involved? And when I sat down with the dean, I basically presented him with a problem, which was we didn't have the $4 million to do the economic development strategy that some consulting firm, I'm not going to say their name, they got laughed at when they said that number to me, and actually the city administrator, we both laughed together. We didn't have that kind of money. But what we did is we had a desire to do the right thing, and he helped me devise a strategy that involved 3 other business schools and 16 MBAs, and a lot of them in this room right now, to help really craft this strategy. Dean Thomas, to my left, which is Georgetown Business School, he joined in very soon thereafter, and I don't know if you guys saw last night, but he was with Bono. You know, he keeps good company, man. I was very impressed. But beyond that, his desire, again, to keep it realistic. And then they reached out and they brought in Howard University, American University, and Dean Harvey and Dean Ginsburg we all got together, put together an organizational strategy and move forward on this. And really what you will see in this plan is really a dedication to that. To the purpose of really changing the city and making it a new place, and really the universities and their intellectual, capital being engaged in the city and making a difference, and I really appreciate that. Roadside development, what can I say about Richard Lake? What an amazing entrepreneur. I shopped at Roadside's Best Buy over there in Wisconsin, and I said, you know, who came up with the idea of building all these units on top of a metro station, Best Buy, and out in the Container Store? I said, now this is my kind of tenant mix. And when I met Richard, I understood. And then the complexity of this project, which you can see is underway right now, I was not surprised that Richard was at the front of it. But it has been really amazing experience working with people like him. And the $2.5+ billion projects that we have going on around the city right now. And as you guys know, I am the official crane counter, and there are 52 cranes up right now in the city, I'm glad to say. I have to say that those cranes aren't up really because of me. They're really up because of the staff that I work with. And I would just like to take a moment for my staff, if you're not standing, to stand up and raise your hands. Raise your hands. I know you guys are shy. Raise your hands right now and be recognized for your great work. They're all over the room. And they worked so hard, and they believe in the work that we're doing so much that they really inspire me. I like working with these guys. They're young, they're bright, they're hardworking. They keep me on my toes. They always challenge me. But I must say that I am always learning, and they are too. I have 2 people I need to recognize for helping us get this strategy, though, especially is David Zipper and Lena Fang. Could you both please stand? They spent day and night helping the students and us craft this document so that it would be realistic. As Mayor Gray indicated, our strategy is focused on 6 broad visions that provide and what we've done is, in this strategy, provided 52 initiatives to help translate this into 100,000 jobs, $1 billion in new tax revenue in just 5 years. In your books, you will see results of the work undertaken to put the strategy together. Additionally, you can find these documents on dmped.dc.gov. And I would suggest that you go there if you don't have a copy. You could also find the our executive strategy and also the entire strategy at dcbiz.gov. We also have condensed this version just so that, you know, people really, I mean, some of that data is really, really intense. And we know that people have a lot of things to do in a day, and there are people who are going to want to know how to engage in this process. So the executive summary is really designed to set up an engagement process. We will not do this alone. This strategy will not be implemented by the government. This strategy will be implemented by the universities, by the government, and the private sector. We are going to do this together. We cannot do this alone. And when I say the private sector, I mean nonprofits and for-profits. This is the only way this can get done because it is complex and it is going to be hard. But we're going to tap into our creative economy, we're going to tap into our tech companies, and we're going to help grow this economy. Based on the suggestions that came out, it offers recommendations to build upon what the city is already doing, doubling down on its resources that are currently in place on international, on technology, and proactively focus on education and medical sectors to leverage our burgeoning tech sector in order to create a medical innovation hub. The 7 sectors in this study make up 88% of all the jobs in the city. It was pretty self-evident which sectors were important, but how to approach those sectors were really the challenge. I hope that each of you take the time to add your, to add to your weekend reading and take this in and see where you can fit in. But it's just a roadmap. We know that we do not operate in a vacuum, and we know that we're going to need some partners to help us raise capital, to help us recruit tenants, and to help us grow our companies. All of the parts of the city will be involved in this, including the Department of Regulatory and Consumer Affairs, which is led by Nick Majette, DHCD, led by Michael Kelly. We're going to run and talk to some of our partners in Qatar about additional investments in the city, and we are currently talking to China investors about investing in the city. But we're going to do this as we engage with our university partners. And speaking of university partners, I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce our next speaker, Dean Guthrie, who I consider not just a peer, but a dear friend. I give you Dean Guthrie, Dean of the Business School of George Washington University.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, for having us here. As the Dean of the Business School at the George Washington University, I can say that when I came here about a little over 2 years ago, I had a dream of really being a part of the kind of process that the Deputy Mayor was talking about, of building a business school that was not just deeply embedded in and engaged in social issues, but trained business leaders to use their business skills and acumen to become citizens of the world that we live in, to become citizens of this place. And more than that, to help elevate the business school in its citizenship and its real contribution to the world that we live in. So when the Deputy Mayor came to me and we started talking about this process, for me it was really the culmination or a next step forward in that dream. And the opportunity that stood before us to me was so evident from the beginning. It was just a very, very exciting opportunity to really be a deep partner, be a part of this process of community and economic development in the nation's capital. Arguably the key place where decisions are the most important place of this entire great nation. And so for me, the opportunity to be a part of that and to do that was just an opportunity I could not pass up, and I just want to thank you all for allowing us to be a part of it. I wouldn't have been able to do this without the close partnership with Dean Thomas as well, who has been a close friend throughout this process and also was an invaluable part of what we were doing. And really kind of the key intellectual force together with me on this process. But there are so many people behind the scenes that actually make something like this possible, and I just want to mention a couple. First and foremost are the students. Without students, some of you are in the audience today. Can you raise your hands, those of you who are here? Thank you. We wouldn't have been able to do this, and it was just such a valuable experience to watch them see what happened. In addition, Barry Miller, who's in the audience today, who basically oversaw that entire process, was just a wonderful contributor. But there are other people that are behind the scenes that you don't see in the final product like this. There's our creative director, Christine Patton, who worked tirelessly over this process and just brought you the beautiful document that's in front of you. Our main writer, Sarah Kellogg, who helped us, and so many other people that I just can't take the time to mention. But most of all, I want to also thank the 185 people who were the stakeholders that we interviewed for this process, giving us your time, your insight, and your enthusiasm for really helping push this city forward was such a great inspiration for me. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, everybody, for what you allowed us to participate in. And I'm going to pledge here today that, following on what the Deputy Mayor asks, that our partnership with the city only begins here, and we will help carry this forward as we move on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doug, who has become a dear friend also. We had a meeting a couple, 3 months ago with a leading group in China, the Wanda Group. And I'll never forget the chairman of the Wanda Group leaning over and he said, "Dean Guthrie really speaks Chinese well, doesn't he?" I said, "You asking me? How would I know?" Sounds good to me. But he is a very focused man who does what he says he's going to do, and that's about as good as it gets, Doug. So thank you very much, and we appreciate Steve Knapp for his commitment as well to these efforts. You know, this is an illustration, too, of something else that we believed and we think can continue to be proliferated, and that is a relationship with our universities. We have an outstanding group of universities here in the District of Columbia that have enormous resources that can be devoted to the growth of this city, and this is an illustration of what can be done and what can be built on. I think it's limited, frankly, only by our imagination in terms of where we want to see the city grow. And in that regard, we are joined today by David Thomas, who's the Dean and the William R. Berkeley Chair of the Georgetown University's McDonough School. That sounds very lofty, but we want to thank you too, Dean Thomas, for your work, for making graduate students available to us and the resources of Georgetown University to be able to help get this done. So we'd be delighted to be able to hear from you, Dean David Thomas.
Thank you, Mayor and Victor. This has been a fabulous process for us to be involved in at Georgetown. And just to put this in some context, I've only been the dean at the McDonough School of Business now for 18 months. I came here after 21 years on the faculty of the Harvard Business School, and before that on the faculty of the Wharton School. And so when I was invited into this process, I was delighted, because one of the things that I've seen is that great cities are defined by great partnerships between universities, the local governments, and the private sector. And so this was a model of precisely the kind of activity that I think it benefits Georgetown as much as it benefits any other partner in this. And I was very proud also to see the engagement that my students reported having in this project, and the way in which I saw them grow over the course of their time working in the project, and then to see the end result that clearly produced value for the broader community. And I hope that this partnership across these sectors represents what we'll see in the future. And I know in conversations that I've had with Jack DeGioia, the president of Georgetown University, he also would like to see more of this kind of partnership and activity across these sectors. And one of the things we endeavor to do at McDonough School of Business is to develop business leaders who understand their role in serving the interests of both business and society. And in that as well, I think our students learned a valuable lesson about what that can look like when they bring their business skills in a way that creates value that serves our economic concerns, but also the broader community. So with that, I want to thank you again for the opportunity to be involved in this project.
I mentioned roadside. I mentioned Richard Lake earlier. Richard was with us on the trip to China. Made a very impressive presentation to various and sundry folks that we met with there and gave them a real flavor of what development and development partners are engaged in here in the District of Columbia. So we're delighted to have Richard as a partner with us, and please join me in welcoming Richard Lake.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Deputy Mayor. Become very close with Deputy Mayor through my partnership at Washington, D.C. Economic Partnership, and Keith Sellers here today, and we really enjoy the work we're bringing all these things together. I think my partners Armand and Todd, who are in the audience, and the rest of the roadside team, I think behind us is a very small moment, a very small a reminder of how public and private activities come together. This project would still be on the drawing boards if it wasn't for the city's dedication, Jack Evans' desire to bring this project together, Shaw community coming together and really making it happen, and the mayor and the deputy mayor and the CFO's office and his entire team bringing this project together. This is a complicated project that includes a 75,000 square foot grocery store that's going to be unlike anything else in the city. 182 key hotel from Cambria Suites, Choice Hospitality, putting a big stake into the project. Federal dollars, HUD financing, one of the largest HUD financings ever for economic development for this city and for the community. And I think all these pieces come together, and then our trip to China, which opened my eyes and my partner Armin's eyes to the world. I mean, really what the world really means, what development means, and what it means to bring all those pieces together to bring something that talks about who we are as a community. And I think City Market O, we're proud of the fact that we believe that this is a project that's a connection piece to the neighborhood, to the downtown, to the economic development that's already on K Street, to the convention center, where this is going to help make a more 360-degree experience for the convention center. So we think it's a project that brought all these factors together, and without all those factors, with all that energy, it would not ever come to fruition. So from us, we have to say thank you to the community, we have to say thank you to the city, we have to say thank you to the council, and to all the people who touched this project. And there's thousands of people who are building this project. There's 300 men and women who are on this site every day building. And there are going to be hundreds of jobs that are going to be created. And the leakage, talk about retail leakage, we hope to capture all this traffic before people head out of the city to stop at the grocery store on multiple times and buy all those goods. And think about how the grocery store is going to act. The grocery stores are one of those retailers that are changing the way we think of retail. It is the one social aspect of retail that still exists. It's where you see your neighbors. It's where you get your meal replacements. This store will be treated more like a pantry than it will be treated like a large shopping experience. And touching this store 3 or 4 times a week is what we think will relatively make and bring more bodies to Shaw. And we're just pleased to be part of Shaw. We think Shaw has such a great soul, such a great history, and we're just excited that we're taking a small part of it. So again, thank you for allowing us to participate, and especially allowing us to have this backdrop for your announcement today. Thank you.
All right. One of the things we emphasized was really expanding international investment. It's certainly evident here. It's certainly evident as well in City Center. Qatar invested about $800 million in the project at City Center, and we actually met with them, had a meeting with them about a week and a half ago, right? And we're talking about additional projects. So there's some real opportunities here, and I think having a plan, something that you can specifically put in front of people with a vision as to where we're trying to move the city, is absolutely instrumental in being able to get people to see that this is what they ought to invest in, this is where they're going. And by the way, this is what one city is. And to me, an illustration of that is when you talk about Microsoft locating in Ward 8 of the District of Columbia, that probably would have been considered heresy not so long ago. but that is exactly what we are having afoot at this stage. And I see Brenda Richardson and James Bunn there, who have been long-standing in their advocacy for these efforts. So it's nice to see you all smiling today. Before we open it up for questions from the media, I want to acknowledge that we've been joined by Councilmember Vincent Orange, Councilmember at large, who too shares a long-standing interest in these economic development issues, and I want to thank you for being here as well, Councilmember Orange. All right, we'll be happy to take questions from the media, and I'll engage all of those to my left, those to my right, in addressing it. Alan?
How does sequestration play into this plan? I mean, are you banking on this plan an idea that we won't go over the fiscal cliff come January 1?
No, I don't think we developed the plan clearly with sequestration in mind, because we started this many months ago. Again, there's one aspect of sequestration we already have taken into consideration, and that is the revenue side. We know that in the worst case scenario this fiscal year we could be impacted to the tune of about, $45 to $50 million. And we've already factored that in with the CFO into our revenue projections for the current year. So if it comes to pass, it's already been taken into consideration. If it doesn't come to pass, then we'll be in a better situation. With respect to other potential areas of cuts, we know what they're likely to be, but frankly, instead of perhaps tamping down our views of what's possible here, this really elevates them, because it starts us to look at a new broadened economy in the city. We all know that the city has been heavily dependent upon the federal sector for so many years, probably since its inception. And what we're trying to do as a part of this is broaden this economy, especially when you look at what we're doing with technology, because there will be virtually all private sector jobs that we're now competing with the region to bring into the city. Tom?
Mr. Mayor, given the public spiritedness of the universities involved, some might say that every one of the universities involved and others have major economic development plans themselves. How do you go forward where the universities don't have some inside track when they want to do things in the city, given all their help with you on this program?
Well, I mean, if it involves a process, a competitive, if it involves a process with the city, it will be competitive just like any other. I think, however, if you look at a lot of this, and I think Victor made this point, a lot of this will be developed within the private sector with catalytic effect, of course, from the city. As we look at what we do with the regulatory process in the city, we can certainly enable those projects, but not just for universities, for anybody who's interested in doing these things. So,
but the universities do have major development projects. Most of, I think all of them do. And do they have an inside track?
I don't think so. I mean, one could perhaps say, the medical hub that we're talking about putting up at, up at Macmillan. Obviously, most of the universities have some substantial healthcare presence, but I don't see them being enabled any more than anybody else who would be interested in doing that. All right.
This is obviously a complex plan, lots of initiatives that will require a lot of planning, and you said earlier that you want to see this through to fruition, so does that mean you expect to be in office in 5 years?
Will you be voting for me, Mike?
You've only got, in your first term, you have 2 years left. So.
I think anything that is visionary has to look more than, anybody that focuses specifically on a term of office is not a visionary, in my opinion. And frankly, whether I'm in office or not, somebody who finds this not compelling and moves in another direction, somebody ought to put a CAT scan to their cerebrum. So whether I'm here or not, I think we have carved out a direction. We have made it clear that we want to be 8 wards, not anything less, that their opportunities are replete in the District of Columbia to develop, that people are moving in. So, I think anybody who is a leader is going to want to paint a picture for the future, whatever role they may play in that future. Ms. Brazil?
I had 2 questions. My first question goes to a comment Mr. Hoskins made and that Dean Guthrie made. In his remarks, Victor Hoskins referenced that the project and plan will need partners. And then Dean Guthrie talked about in developing the plan, 185 stakeholders were interviewed. And indeed, starting on page 105, there's a list of 185 stakeholders who were interviewed. My question is that in terms of developing the plan and then going forward, I don't see any civic or community leaders that were consulted in terms of developing the plan. And indeed, how do you go forward if in many instances community input and community opposition might be an impediment?
Well, I think we see this as a dynamic process, and I would ask Victor to join in, and Dean Guthrie, if you'd like to join in. But I see this as a dynamic process that there were 185 stakeholders who were interviewed, but there's no way that we can continue to develop this plan without the engagement of people all across the city. For example, let me take the St. Elizabeth's effort. There are people who have weighed in on the development of St. Elizabeth's with the idea of developing a technology hub there, who probably are not listed among those 185 stakeholders because they were not interviewed specifically for this project, but their input certainly has influenced where we are, where we are today. So, Victor, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Thank you very much for your question, and you're accurate in your assessment. But many of the people that are in these organizations are also citizens of DC and civic leaders in and of themselves. They just weren't documented in that role in that way in this document. If you, as the mayor mentioned, he mentioned St. Elizabeth and how we've been engaged with the community there. You could also say Walter Reed, where we have had the local redevelopment authority basically guiding that, and that included a tremendous amount of citizen input. We are always engaging. The great thing about the city of D.C., which is very unique among cities in the country, and it really was something that I had to learn about, is really the entire strata of elected office in the ANCs. Those ANCs provide tremendous input, and we are required to engage them on every project that we do in the city. So that's a very fortunate thing. We will always have that, but many of the people that you will see in that document are actually civic leaders also in other roles.
Mr. Hoskins, I don't want to be argumentative, but indeed
Really?
I know.
This is Dorothy Brazil I'm talking to, or does somebody invade her body?
A large number of the people that you consulted with.
Yes.
And indeed, in fact, they are not D.C. residents. They are not engaged in their community.
I didn't say they all were. I said they some were, but I know you love to be argumentative, so I'll take your point.
Let me correct the record. I'm not being argumentative. I'm trying to get the facts straight so citizens know what's going on.
Okay.
And it's not being argumentative. This
yes,
is your
it is.
plan you worked on, and I think you should be able, an adult, to stand up and answer the questions on it.
We can disagree. We don't have to be disagreeable.
That's my point. That's my point. Mr. Mayor, the other question I had is in terms of your proposal to develop 100,000 new jobs. My concern is, what do you say about the long-term unemployed in D.C.? What do you say about the individuals, especially east of the river, who will look at this plan and, at least on its face, it doesn't say, that's not job creation for me. When you speak oftentimes, most recently, about creating jobs in the District of Columbia, you tie it to the new residents coming to the District of Columbia, the new residents you want to attract to D.C. Well, what do you say in terms of job creation as regards the residents that are already here that are unemployed? Do these 100,000 new jobs you're talking about include those individuals, especially east of the river?
It does. In fact, if you look at what's happened in the first 22 months that we've been here, there have been 23,000 jobs that have been created in the city, which again, if you do the math, if you extrapolate on that number, it isn't really hard to get to 100,000 because what is that? About 1,000 jobs a month, right? So what is 5 years would be 60 months, right? So that'd be 60,000 jobs. And if you look at what we've done, for example, with One City, One Hire, the unemployment levels have been brought down, at all levels in the city, and that has included people who may not have, impressive educational credentials. Our Ward 8, for example, our Ward 8 unemployment level is still extremely high. It's 21.9%. But when we started, it was 30%. So it has come down more rapidly than any other area in the city, despite the fact that it continues to be high. If you look at what we've done working with the council on the workforce intermediary, the two areas that are focused on where we will align training with opportunities will be the hospitality industry and the construction industry, both of which now and will be even more so be replete with opportunities for people who may not have the level of educational credentials that they would like to have. We know that we've got people who may not have even graduated from high school in the District of Columbia, and the jobs that we are creating in the hospitality industry as well as the construction industry, we know will be able to be, well, our jobs will be able to be filled in substantial part by folks with those educational backgrounds. Also, if you look at technology, people tend to think of technology as, having to have a higher ed, a graduate degree, a master's degree, perhaps a PhD. But we also know that STEM education is going to create jobs at a host of levels. This ties in, for example, with what we're doing in the education arena. We're building a new Ballou High School, a high school that will be ready in July of 2014. That high school will have a concentration in STEM areas, and there will be opportunities for those young people coming out of high school, if they choose not to go on to higher education ever or right then, to be able to get jobs as a result of that. So your point is well taken, and it's one that we are sensitive to and recognize that as we try to make sure that we have these higher level jobs coming into the city. We have a number of residents also who may not have this broad range of educational credentials and skills that will qualify them for a broad range of jobs. Let me try to get somebody, Sam, who hasn't asked the question yet.
Yes, Mayor. Every city is not having this level of development. I heard Deputy Mayor Hoskins say 52 cranes. I don't recall seeing that many cranes in D.C. in my time here. What do you attribute this? I mean, what's going on here? Is it the Obama administration? Is it what is that?
It's outstanding mayoral leadership, Sam.
I'm talking about.
And I want to thank you for that question.
But I mean, seriously, it's been going on for a while, but it's picked up. I mean, you must have some theory about this.
Well, I don't know. We're not so much engaging in theories as we are trying to take advantage of the opportunity. I think this is a place where people want to be. We know that there are people who are, for example, who are tired of long commutes and they want to live in the District of Columbia. There are companies that want to locate in the District of Columbia. You look at, for example, I use Giant. You look at the number of grocery stores developing in the city, and I think one of the phenomena, locating residences above the grocery store. You think about that for a second. You say, what a great idea. It puts a customer base right there. It gives people a convenient place to be able to live in the District of Columbia, and we're probably doing more of that than other places. We have had, we've had a history now, probably, 10 or 12, 14 years of increasing financial stability in the city. And I think that's another factor that's bringing people here. And frankly, we are increasingly sending the message, which we're doing more so in the recent past, that we want to be a business-friendly city. I want to go back to something that I hope the council will go back to, and I think the two council members here, I don't want to speak for them because they do that quite well themselves, but when you talk about the tech sector, I think we need to go back to that issue and talk about how do we create a more attractive environment for technology firms to come into the city. And we're doing more of that. So there's a multiplicity of factors, Sam, not the least of which, frankly, is we just are an attractive city to be at this stage. Mark. I'm going to come back. I'm going to try to get those. And by the way, this is just media only. Okay, Joyce. Okay.
Mayor Gray, you talk about 52 cranes, more grocery stores, more housing, all this economic development, more people coming to the city, and in the same day we're hearing 20 schools are closing. Can you talk about the school closings in the context of this plan? I know we'll probably talk about the school closings later in the press conference, but
in the context of this plan, I think people look at this and say, you're anticipating more people coming, you're preparing for that, the city is growing, but at the same time you're closing schools.
Well, I think you've got to put, public education in a larger context too, Mark. We also acknowledge that the population of kids in public education is growing also. This is the second consecutive year in which we're seeing growth both in the D.C. public schools and the charter schools. The reality is that when we talk about closing schools, you're talking specifically about D.C. public schools, but the charters just added 4,000 more students this year. The charters are opening more schools. We have 57 charter schools now, the most we've ever had, and 102 campuses, the most that we've ever had in the city. So I would look at it more broadly in terms of public education. Also, I think, Mark, when you look at quote unquote the consolidations, which I would propose to call it, they're not all the same. Some of them are looking at a particular school whose population is expanding beyond its current capacity and using another school to help expand that capacity. It's recognizing that we'll do business differently with our children with disabilities. A couple of the schools that are involved are schools that have been devoted historically to children with disabilities. We're doing business differently there, so that will move somewhere else. And frankly, it's also recognizing that we do have some schools that are under-enrolled, putting them together so that we can expand the richness of the curricula that are being offered to our children. So there's no one explanation for school consolidation. That's why, as the Chancellor and I talked this through, the term consolidation is a much more appropriate and accurate term than closing. And in a couple of cases, for example, Thurgood Marshall, that school is being closed, quote unquote, to be renovated, to be remodeled, to be modernized, and will be reopened. Same thing with Spingarn. Spingarn is going to reopen as a tech high school so that we can offer, to go back to the question that was asked earlier by Ms. Brazil about the kinds of jobs in the city. That high school will open as a tech high school where there will be jobs immediately available for young people coming out of high school. So again, that is a school that's not being closed. It's being temporarily taken out of circulation so that we can remodel it and use it for other purposes of education. Tom, I guess you'll get the last question.
You mentioned the council. I wanted to ask Mr. Evans, since he's the Finance and Revenue Chairman, a lot of this sounds like it's going to have to go through the council. There's been a lot of change in the council, new chairman and all of that. But Mr. Evans over here was bouncing off of his seat, talked about the changes in the Verizon Center, the Convention Center, the baseball center. Can I just hear from a moment from him on what the council view of all of this is? Is it pie in the sky? Is this doable? So, or do you want to just keep it as your press conference?
You can ask him. You can ask him afterwards. Well, you don't have any difficulty tracking people downtown. You know what? Jack and I have worked together a long time. We're in his ward. I certainly am not going to deprive him of an opportunity to speak to this. If he is, yeah, well, if he's absolutely supportive of this, I wholeheartedly agree with him. If he's not, get the hook. Come on, Jack. Come on, Jack. Come on. Yeah.
I don't want to get in the middle of these two guys. All right. Thank you very much. And first of all, let me thank the mayor and his whole team and the universities and Richard and everybody else who put this plan together, and give him another round of applause. Terrific job, Mr. Mayor. And the mayor is right. He and I have worked together on a number of issues. You know, just to answer that one question, I'm not going to ramble either, but I remember the very first project this city did in 1991. It was National Public Radio. John Wilson and I did it. It was the very first time city ever supported a private entity that was happened to be a nonprofit in building the building up here. And since that time, we've done literally billions and billions of projects together with the private sector. This building here wouldn't be here if that convention center wasn't there, okay? The downtown would not have been jump-started without the Verizon Center, and it goes on and on. The mayor and I have worked when he was chairman on a number of, I couldn't even list them all. You know, when we're in a community where there's 5 in every community we go to. And that's why this economic development is happening, because we're working together to make it happen. This plan is a great plan. And as the finance chair on the council, I'll be working with the mayor and his team to implement it, because the government is such an important component of any economic development project. That's why Washington, D.C. is the fastest growing city in America today, and why we're not Detroit. That's the answer, because we work together, we make things happen in the face of a lot of opposition sometimes, because we do what's right, and it's going to benefit all of our citizens. And so, Mr. Mayor, I'm glad to join with you here today and work with you and make this happen. Okay?
Thank you, sir.
All right. Tom, thanks for the question.
No, you hoped for. Again, you know, without being redundant, there is an incredibly strong nexus between this activity with economic development and our education. And one of the things that we have to do, which on its face sounds so obvious, but it just doesn't happen, and that is create real alignment between what we educate our kids to do and what the jobs are that are available in the city. So many of our folks, you know, get an education, they go somewhere else. It's not only for this reason, but in part it's because the opportunities that they would like to be able to pursue just haven't been available here. So when we talk about, you know, Raise DC, it's a banner under which some of the things we are engaged in stand, or, you know, from 0 to 24, or workforce intermediate. Those things all tie together into a concept of one city, and that is no matter where you live, that you have an opportunity to be able to succeed in this city. Succeed educationally, succeed as a family, and succeed in whatever your pursuits may be for your career. And that's the kind of city we want to be. We want to be a city that is not necessarily self-contained, but a city that is self-sufficient. And that's why moving away from, you know, continued dependence to the extent we are on the federal government is so important for the future development of the city, because our fiscal fortunes have been tied to the rise and fall, if you will, of the federal government for so long, for obvious reasons. But that doesn't mean it has to continue to be, and that's exactly what this plan is about. So thank you all very much. There may be questions from the media on other issues, but we're finished with the economic development plan. Yeah.
We're live on Channel 16, so please don't come up. We're continuing. We'll take this picture, and then we're going to continue with other reporters' questions.
All right, look this way, gentlemen. One last shot. Thank you.
Have you seen the thing?
Yeah, I saw it.
Yep. Yep. Sure.
How you doing? Fine. How are you? Thank you. Thank you very much. Absolutely. Thank you. Glad to have you.
Okay, can everyone please be quiet? We're continuing the press conference. We're continuing the press conference.
Tom Sherwood said he can't hear in here, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you, I know some of you just came for the economic development portion of this, so we'd ask you maybe to go out into the alcove here and continue your conversation. But if you would leave the area of where this is continuing. Come on, guys, please. Matt.
Just 1 second. One more question about the jobs.
I'll repeat the question.
100,000 jobs is a big, big number. For folks who are going to be hearing this today, you know, what kinds of jobs are we talking about? You know, you mentioned construction and hospitality specifically. Is that going to be the majority of these jobs? And for the 8.7% of people in D.C. who are looking for work, you know, how does this change for them today?
Well, You know, we're looking at about half of those jobs coming from the real estate or construction activity in the District of Columbia. About 20,000 jobs, these are all obviously round numbers, but 20,000 jobs being created in the technology arena. Again, if we're successful, which we think we can be, in attracting more firms and keeping the firms here in the city. Not to be cynical, but we've had two kinds of technology firms here. We've had those that have started and failed. We've had those that have started and succeeded and left, which means that we had a net of zero in many instances at the end of the day. So we're looking at the growth in technology as accounting for about 20,000. Higher education and healthcare, about 5,000 of those jobs. And then about 2,500 jobs in retail. And you can see, again, with what's happening across the street, there will be more retail jobs. And then maybe another 15 to 20,000 jobs across a variety of professional services. But again, they all fit within the framework of the various visions that I talked about earlier and how we want to effectuate those visions here in the city. Yes, identify yourself.
I'm Aaron Wiener with the City Paper.
Okay.
So here in the report, you talk about the constraints on office space and the high cost of office space in the city due to height limits. Does the report anticipate changes to the Height Act? And
no. I mean, I suppose that could happen, but that is something we've tried to craft a plan that over which we have some reasonable degree of control. Obviously, the Height Act would require federal changes over which we have no control. You know, we might get a small change in the Height Act, allowing us to use what's called these mechanical penthouses for living space, but this doesn't anticipate a major change in the Height Act. That probably would have a major impact on the number of people living in the city as well. Yes.
Liz Lawson with the Washington Post.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions about, you have heard an issue in Southeast Washington where Metro is proposing to cut bus service to an area there. And the reason is because they say some kids are throwing rocks or objects to the buses, and people have been injured. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, and what is the city doing to address this issue?
Yeah, we have heard about that, and I've asked the Deputy Mayor Quander to take that issue on. The question, for those of you who didn't hear it, is succinctly put, is that Metro is proposing to curtail bus service in areas east of the river, and I think specifically areas of Anacostia, because of allegations of rock throwing and other things. First of all, we've not been able to identify, right, Paul, that many incidents that have occurred, and I'm unalterably opposed to that. I mean, that's exactly the direction we don't want to go in the District of Columbia, where when you live in a particular place, you feel like the services of this city are not available to you in the same way. So I'm going to ask Deputy Mayor Quander to talk about his findings to date, but we're going to be working with Metro to try to, we got to find another way to do this. We can't, some people depend on that bus service to go to work.
We've had an opportunity through MPD to reach out to Metro. And the information that we have in Southeast, there were 4 reported incidents, 4, that took place at different times in different parts of the Southeast community. So there was no pattern. There was nothing that points to a particular neighborhood. There were 4 random acts. When we look across the city, there were other acts committed at greater frequency than what we know were reported in Southeast. So we're going to continue to work with Metro. MPD is available. We do things to make sure that we have heightened presence. You know, we have a number of foot patrols that are out. Some of those foot patrols actually take the Metro bus to their locations and take Metro bus back to the station. So we have a heightened presence. We want to be responsive. We will be responsive, but we just have not seen the great numbers that have been reported. We just don't have that.
So when Metro says that they are seeing this happening multiple times a week and sometimes daily to the routes W6 and W8, are they making that up, or what's the difference?
The only thing that I can say is that when this was brought to our attention, we immediately reached out to Metro. We asked for specific numbers. Our commanders met with theirs. The information that I received back was that there were 4 incidents, 4, in this calendar year and 4 last calendar year, total of 8. That is not a significant number. We want to make sure that any passenger riding a Metro bus is safe. Any incident will be addressed. But there has not been, as far as I am aware, any great increase in the number of incidents.
Deputy Mayor, you said that there were more incidents or more serious incidents elsewhere in town. Could you put a little meat on those bones? How many, what type of incidents, where?
It's my understanding that there were more incidents along the U Street corridor than all of Southeast. And so I think that we really need to take a look at the numbers that Metro has and the response. Again, we treat each of these incidents very seriously. We don't want any projectiles thrown at any bus, any moving vehicle whatsoever. So we take it seriously, and we stand prepared to work with Metro to make sure that this issue is resolved. But we are not seeing the numbers that have been reported.
You said there were no 2 in one place. Is that what you said?
Right. That's my understanding, that they have been sporadic. There were 4 in different parts of Southeast, the area where I live.
So do you suspect that Metro is using this as an excuse to cut a low-performing route and not a high-performing route like U Street?
I will let Metro and I will let you ask that question of other authorities. All I'm saying, from a public safety standpoint, we have not seen the same numbers.
Mayor Gray, what does this say to you?
Says to me we need to work hard to make sure that the same levels of service are available to people no matter where they live in the city. That people who live in these neighborhoods use these conveyances to get to work, to get to other parts of the city. And based on the data we have seen thus far, there just doesn't seem to be the kind of cases being made to curtail service. So we're going to continue to work with Metro, to work with our law enforcement officials to try to reach an accommodation on this. Tom?
As you know, yesterday, former Chairman Brown was sentenced. So that leaves, as far as City Hall and the U.S. Attorney goes, some lingering questions into your 2010 campaign. On the one hand, I'm sure you'd like to see that put behind you. On the other hand, every time there's a development, it causes a stir. It disrupts, announcements like this on economic development. Given that kind of paradox, how quickly would you like to see that probe progress?
Well, I think they'll have to decide that for themselves, Tom. They are painstaking in their investigations of these issues, and when they get to a conclusion, I'm sure we'll know it as will you.
What would you like to see, though?
What would I like to see? What do you mean?
How quickly would you like this to progress?
Well, obviously, we'd like to see it moved on. But again, I underscore that we recognize that these are painstaking, complicated, investigations, and when they get to a conclusion, they'll get to it. Yes.
Hi, Lisa from the Examiner. I have 2 questions about school closings.
Yes.
One, there's been a huge emphasis on community engagement that we didn't see the last time that schools were closed, which is great. Yet I have a lot of parents asking why, this official announcement was made at 4 p.m. yesterday, and the deadline to testify before the D.C. Council was at 5 p.m., giving parents an hour to basically get over their shock and then, go through that sort of bureaucracy. Was this planned well? I mean, what happened here?
Well, as you might know, we don't schedule the council's hearings. They schedule those hearings, and I think there are actually 2 hearings. I think there's one on the 15th and another on the 19th, and the council will have to speak for itself, but I can't imagine they would turn people away who want to speak on this issue. And please remember that we're doing our own outreach into communities as well. We want this to be as thorough a discussion as we possibly can have. I'm sorry?
Would you want them to extend that deadline?
I think the council will have to make that decision. Again, we're going to have our own discussions about this. So the council is having 2 hearings, but we'll be out in communities as well. There will be meetings that we're conducting on the 27th, the 28th, 29th, and 5th of December, 27th, 28th, 29th of November. So we hope the council would make available those opportunities, but there will be 4 that we are providing ourselves.
And my other question is, some of these schools that are up for closing just received new principals this year, or the city just invested, hundreds of thousands of dollars in projects with these schools. What happened there?
Hundreds of thousands of dollars in what?
Grounds projects, making the buildings better for students, programs.
Well, people have asked me whether we are closing schools that have been modernized. I don't know of any schools that, have been recently modernized that won't continue to be used. For example, if you take Francis Stevens, the intent is to use Francis Stevens now as an extension of school without walls. So that's why we say consolidation. Consolidation is a much better term because people hear the term closing and they think that the doors have been shuttered, the windows have been boarded up, and these buildings no longer will be used for those purposes. And that is not true in a lot of instances. And I think Francis Stevens is a good example of that.
Some of these schools do have projects and they do have new leadership.
This has to be your last question because we got others that want to ask
Well, I'm
questions.
saying that a lot of these schools do have new leadership and do feel like the city invested in them very recently. And to be frank, they feel like they kind of got played now that they hear that they're.
Well, I don't know that we haven't been able to find a place for a good leader in the past. Martin.
So there's been a lot of confusion about this new kind of ambulance staffing plan. At first, there was rumors that no ambulances were going to run from 1 to 7 a.m. and then it was clarified that there will be, but there'll be fewer paramedics on shifts. So can you clarify what exactly the plan is going to be and when that could go into effect?
Well, first of all, as we tried to make clear, and that is that the plan, which is still under development, has to go before the council before it can be implemented. But the idea is to really try to align the resources with the needs that exist in the city. The chief is here, and I'll ask him to come up and speak to it. But they've done a pretty thorough analysis of utilization of these services. And by the way, are you all aware that 85% of the FMES runs now are for medical reasons rather than for fires? And it's grown tremendously over the last few years. And so in recognition of that, this is an effort to try to align how we deploy the resources with what the demonstrated needs are.
Thank you, Mayor Gray. You told me you were going to ask that question, too. And I think it's only fitting you ask it today when you're talking about economic development, because the numbers that we put together, the raw data we put together, was not only vetted in fire and EMS. Jim Denninger was here, and the Board of Trade actually looked at our numbers and confirmed that we are moving in the right direction in terms of putting our resources where our needs are. There was a tweet that went out that was not quite accurate. I don't know if you can see this graph, but the graph illustrates what we're doing right now, and it also illustrates a gap here in terms of the needs. The next graph, and we'll be able to share this again with the media, shows that as we balance out our resources, we'll be able to better meet our needs if we follow the plan that we've put together. As the mayor said, it has not been fully vetted yet. We have to make sure the council takes a look at it and approves it. We've talked to both unions yesterday. They've seen the plan before, and while they may have some questions about it, so far it seems like we're moving in the right direction. And the best thing about this plan is that after decades of doing business a different way, we're all talking about doing business a different way now and making sure that we meet the population growth that we expect to have in the future. So thanks for asking the question.
You know, we wind up in, I mean this more broadly, we wind up in a dilemma that maybe you all could help us solve. And that is, we have tried to take a painstaking approach to things that are complicated like this. So it means multiple steps, meeting with a lot of people. And what happens in this 24/7 news cycle now is, you know, some member of the media gets a hold of a piece of information and then it goes out there. And it unfortunately gets misconstrued by a number of people along the way. I mean, the chief had a very methodical plan that he was executing on this. He had already scheduled meetings yesterday morning with the unions, meeting with other stakeholders to try to make sure everybody understood what it is we were trying to do, and then to shape that plan based on the input. But what happens then when a story gets out there in the media, then you start reacting to that rather than really reacting to the opportunities to meet with people and the shaping of the plan as input would allow. So that's something that you all can help us with, because this is a case where he had to start reacting to, things that were in the media that may not have been complete, and instead of really working methodically to where he was trying to go. We'll take one more question. But Nikita, you haven't had a chance.
We have this is from Mike DeBonis. Can't be here. What's your response to the CAB's ruling on Verifone yesterday? obviously been trying to push the tax meters to be installed more quickly. What does this mean for the city and your administration, and what's going on with the handling of contracts lately?
Well, first of all, as you know, for those who don't know, the contract award was appealed to the Contract Appeals Board, and they rendered a decision indicating that the process was not done as well as it should have been. I am hugely disappointed, in not the CAB, Nikita, but in the performance of those who were involved in the contracting process. As a matter of fact, a contracting officer was dismissed as a result of this effort. This has set us back in terms of time. We had anticipated, had we been on the timetable we set, that all of these smart meters would have been installed by the end of December. That clearly cannot happen now. So what we're looking for is what is the most effective way to move forward? Do we have to rebid this entirely? That's being, the city administrator is working on that with those who are involved. Will we be able to somehow modify this process to make sure that it is sound as we go forward? But again, I want to move forward as quickly as we possibly can to do what we set out to do, but we clearly don't want to revisit this process again. Okay, thank you all very much.